Welcome to Conversations on Leadership with Dr. Dave, where we are here to answer 4 leadership questions from some of the best leaders and leadership minds in the country. That's our mission. So with us today to help us get to that point, we have Dr. Robert Wilson. So welcome, Robert.
Thank you, Dave. Thanks for having me. I greatly appreciate it.
Glad you're here. We're really looking forward to it. So tell the listeners, give us an introduction, who you are, what you do. Give us a scoop.
All right. So a little bit about myself. My name is Dr. Robert L. Wilson Jr., originally from New Jersey. Been living in North Carolina about 20 plus years. I'm an entrepreneur, author, consultant, speaker, coach, and trainer. My areas of focus are personal, professional leadership, and organizational education, development, and training. In terms of my background, educationally, background in psychology, sociology, and leadership with the focus on global consulting. Work background has been mental health field, continuing education, and then now an entrepreneur. I have 3 businesses, owner and principal consultant of Robert Wilson Consulting, Wilson Global Outreach Solutions, and I have an academy, Global Solutions Education and Training Academy. The academy's main focus is workforce development and kind of revamped it in terms of the focus on virtual, online, and remote training and learning for the workforce. Robert Wilson Consulting is more about personal and professional development, and Wilson Global Outreach Solutions is more about leadership and organizational development.
Nice. So it sounds like the Wilson Global is more akin to my line of work.
Yeah, definitely.
Nice. Yes. No, that's awesome. We have a ton of resources around here for workforce development. So, like I said, that's one of those things that it's like, no need to reduplicate the wheel, where I'm at. But no, that's awesome. So, just because I know a little bit of the background, tell me a little bit about the degree program that changed your first name without you having to go to court.
All right. So I'm a graduate of Regent, Doctor of Strategic Leadership. And one of the things that, first of all, great program, as you can attest to it. But one of the things that really helped me in terms of leadership was really helping me to expand my view to a more holistic perspective of leadership. And then also really wanted me to hone in on some of the gaps in leadership, because a lot of times leadership focuses on qualities and characteristics that I've seen a lot of times, but I think a missing component is the development, education, and training piece. And so that became like a real passion of mine, and kind of the fire that burned, if you will, to really focus on leadership and going to Regent and making a difference.
Nice. Well, one of the things I was telling somebody on a previous podcast, and I'd love to get your opinion on it since we took the same beat down. Is I remember when the dean first, we were there in the lecture hall, and you got all the people there, and he basically tells all the MBA students, and they start crying mercilessly and weeping that, oh my God, Harvard Business Review is no longer an acceptable source to quote in a paper, right? It's not a peer review. So they're bawling like little babies, right? And then he realized, oh, this is the part I'm getting to. They peel back the curtain, right? So sort of like the Wizard of Oz, right? You see the little man right there with the little knobs and the sticks, right? Instead of the Great and Wizard of Oz. It's like you think you know all this about leadership when you come in, or about whatever the topic, but specifically the leadership end of it. And then we peels back the curtain and you look down the rabbit hole, and it's almost like taking the pill in the Matrix, right? It's like, if you take this, you're going to see that you're going to go down this rabbit hole and you have no idea. It was so humbling to realize I had no idea what I didn't know. Like how much is out there, like how many people have done all of it, written dozens of books and hundreds of articles, and they're true experts. And then you come out and you got, doctor, and it's like, oh, you're an expert in this. And you're like, man, I ain't an expert in nothing. Like I've seen down the rabbit hole and you don't even realize how vast any topic, how vast it is and how much information and knowledge is out there and how much people have done until you kind of peek behind the curtain and they realize, wow. Yeah, that's enough to humble you and make you feel wholly inadequate to a certain degree, but So how did that hit you? I'll tell you how it hit me. So I mean, how did that hit you when you kind of took the red pill and peeked down the rabbit hole when you first started?
Well, first of all, I thought it was really humbling because what it did was it put you in a position and a posture to respect the process as opposed to just getting to the uh, the destination. And so it also kind of made me recognize how to be empowered before I was. Like for instance, a lot of times people are try to be empowered, but you first got to recognize you have power. And I think that was what kind of what happened for me is it made me realize one, how to explore, how to research. I thought I
Mm.
knew about research. I did not know about research.
No, no, no,
Right.
no.
I thought research was really just a couple citations and saying, hey, I looked at this and it not only taught me how to research, it taught me how to read research. What? Read it? Yeah, actually read it. And be able to analyze and assess it. And the other part of it was it helped me to bring it to a practical, pragmatic way, which when
Mm.
you're taught it initially, you don't think you can get there. You're like, how can all this information get to me helping people or me providing solutions? But it does. So that journey really was within myself and then outside of myself being able to help other people.
I'd agree with that 100%. Like you said, as far as snapping all the pieces together, it's like, oh, wait a minute, I don't just get the Cliff Notes version of it. You know, like we were joking about, like I said, the Harvard Business Review for the guys. Like, no, that's not the source. The source is the peer reviewed paper on the bottom that they did a synopsis of for HBR, right? So yeah, that's a great place to look, and then like immediately go to the bottom of the page. Like I'm not even going to read this. This is the Cliff Notes version of it. I got to go to the bottom and see where they took this from, and then go to the original source. And yeah, it definitely to think you could do some research, or you could write a paper, or you could do whatever. Yeah, humbling is just that's the
I
best
think that's a
word for
great
it.
word.
Like
I think humbling is a great place to start, right?
yeah,
It's a great place to start.
yes, and I remember too, as far as speaking about eating a bushel basket full of humble pie. It wasn't just when when the dean was like, "Okay, here's the way the next 4 years are going to go." I remember when we were in the one lecture hall and Dr. Becker was up there and he gave some kind of presentation. And for those that you don't know, white South African, that Commonwealth British type of accent type of deal, and to say he was eloquent would be cursing him. I mean, he was just amazing. He hung off every word. I didn't understand like 60% of them because they were like $20 words, right? But but I mean, I was just enthralled. I mean, I was like, oh my god, this guy's amazing. And then at the very end of it, he's like, and at the end of 4 years, you're going to be able to do the same thing I just did on the stage. And I'm like, uh oh. I was like, no, I'm not. I knew good and well. I was like, I can get up and talk in front of folks, and I taught classes for years and doing training and development or whatever. But I looked at it and I was talking about humble. I'm like, but I can't do that. Like, I can't. No, in my current skill set, there's no way I could do that. And so that's when I went back that next evening and called my buddy who'd been trying to get me into Toastmasters for like 7 years, and I blew him off and I called him up and it's this string of mea culpas. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. You're smart. I'm stupid. You the man. I'm a chump. I'm like, tell me about this Toastmasters thing because I can't do what this cat just did on the stage. And he said, I got to do that in 4 years. I need help. That was humbling, man, from a public speaking presentation standpoint.
Yeah, I thought for me the entire lineup was immaculate. So it
Oh,
was just speaker after speaker, eloquence after eloquence in terms of just the delivery, the effectiveness, but also their take on leadership. And that's what really it was humbling, but it was also inviting. It
yes.
invited me to be able to grab the torch from and really learn and glean from these individuals. And then that's where that encouragement came in that you can do this because they were all not the same, but they all spoke about leadership. And so that was really eye opening for me. It was really insightful and it kind of grabbed my attention. if you will. But it definitely helped me to start recognizing what is my voice in leadership and how do I help other people to find their voices as well.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that we talked about off air is that you leave out of there with an extensive toolkit, to say the least, of different things that you can do, and the knowledge of how to go about finding. I know how to think, I know how to research, I know how to critically analyze something. So you don't have to know it all, or learn it all, or do it all. You just know, hey, if I need to research something new, or I need to, find out more about something, I can at least do it in a systematic way and feel like I've got some, a little bit of credence behind what I'm doing. I'm actually going to try to find and gather and compile and analyze some good data versus, whatever happened to be on Google or Wikipedia or whatever ChatGPT said, man, it'll be all right.
Yeah, you definitely find a winning infrastructure to be able to implement. And like you said, I think that's something that probably goes really unsung in conversations is critical thinking. Like the fact that you realize that how to think, that you can think, even if you don't necessarily have the answers right there, if it's not looking you in the face, you can intentionally and strategically put yourself in a position and posture to actually wait for it, think about it, right? Think about it.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. I mean, that's the cool thing about it. You feel like, okay, I can tackle this. I don't have to know everything about it. I can start learning, and the more I get into the research, the more I start learning, the more I realize what else is out there. It just keeps opening up other doors and possibilities. And unfortunately, for some of the papers and for the dissertation stuff, oh, I'm looking at all these articles. Wow, there's something super fascinating. And I go down and look at that one, then I look at this one, I look at this one. So it's easy to get distracted and go down a rabbit hole. They're like, look, save the world when you're done. Just finish the dissertation. Like simple. Like a couple variables, quantitative, done. Like you're the one word for the next year, done. Right? Not do all the research you want when you're done. Right?
Right. I had an awesome chair, and one of the things that which really cool was it was like, hey, this is for you to finish school, but your journey doesn't stop. It really starts once you graduate,
Yep.
with your doctorate degree, and now all the stuff you've been talking about, all the stuff you were writing about, it's not just words. Put it into action and put a plan out there and start showing people and helping people and inspiring people about true, authentic leadership. And it's many facets and layers.
Oh, 100%. And that, what you just said, is a perfect transition into our first question. So, what does leadership mean to you, and what does good leadership look like?
All right. So that's a great question. I want to share a quick story, if you will, and then I'll go
Please.
right into the question. Uh, Initially, I thought leadership was being in charge and telling people what to do, right? And I had,
Boy, did we
and
learn.
I'm being totally transparent here.
Oh, yeah, no, I'm
And
guilty.
and I had just graduated from undergrad, and I was working in a group home, and I was working in mental health, and I had an amazing supervisor who helped me to understand what leadership was, and basically helping me to realize that leadership, first of all, is intentional, it's strategic, it's about impact, influence, and interaction, right?
I
I
like
know,
that.
and so, because it's about how you influence people, it's about how you impact not only people, but the environment that you're leading in. But it's also
Mm.
about interaction. How do you show up as a leader? How do you connect as a leader? How do you inspire as a leader? And so that's what it started making me think about, like what true leadership is. It's about helping and serving people. Um, it's about empowering them. It's about educating them. It's about enriching them in their lives, and also even in their roles and responsibilities that you're leading them in. Right?
Mm.
What does it look like? All right. I think that's important. What it looks like communication, it looks like connection, and it looks like taking inspired action. Um, that has evolved because a lot of times I used to think leadership was about not just getting people to do something, because a lot of times you can tell people what to do, one, it doesn't mean they're going to do it, but also
True.
it doesn't mean that they're inspired to do it. Now, I have to admit that has changed over the years in terms of me recognizing about the inspiration piece, because when people take inspired action, that's when true transformation happens. First, with the person that you're encouraging to take the action, not only in inspiring them, but also the results and outcomes because of the inspired action. That's when, and I think we talked about this kind of offline, is when people start getting true results, even though those were not the results that they necessarily were looking for. But when they start seeing them, it's life changing and transformative for everybody involved. So that's kind of a quick version of what does leadership look like to me, right? And
Love
what
it,
it
love
is.
it, love it. All right, man. You dropped some gold, man. Give me the three eyes again. I like that, man. That was tight. What were the three
So
eyes of leadership? Dr. Wilson's three eyes of leadership.
impact, influence, and interaction.
Love it, man. That's awesome. Like I said, that sounds like some intellectual property right there, man. I could see a book and some training. I don't know, man. Just the way to mind things,
That
Yeah.
critical thinking, right?
Yeah, I was to say, okay, well, like I said, how do I take that and get it to the masses? Oh, but that's good, man. I really like that. And you're right. Most people think when you go to use just an easy model, right? You look at Maxwell's 5 levels of leadership, and most people look at that level one as okay, positional leadership. Like that's what a leader is. It's a place on an org chart. I can stand in between you and a paycheck. Well, yeah, you tell me what to do. The only reason I'm inspired to do it is because I'm really not digging being homeless, right? So I like to pay the rent and, maybe put some gas in the car so I can keep, so I can do something on the weekend. So yeah, I'm just inspired not to lose my job. That's about the extent of it. But yeah, you're not really engaged and into it and really, like you said, taking the inspired action. You're just compliant. I don't think leadership is really, the compliance hall monitor. Could be wrong, but yeah, I don't think so.
Yeah, I mean, I think that gives you that good foundation to start talking about things like purpose, perspective, principles, practice. What does it look like in real time, real life? Because sometimes conceptually it might be one thing, but in practice it might look totally different, right? So how do you get a chance to actually share that information, um, and that information becomes something that people can put into real steps and take real measures to accomplish things and goals and strategic plans.
100%, 100%. Well, with that, let's go ahead and we'll finish this segment of Conversations on Leadership with Dr. Dave, and we will come back in just a moment with our second segment and our next set of questions. See you in a bit. We are back with Conversations on Leadership with Dr. Dave, and we are here with Dr. Robert Wilson, and we're going to jump straight on into our next question. What was one of the biggest leadership challenges you've had to face?
Oh, that's an awesome question. Um, it was early in my leadership career, but also I've seen it throughout my leadership journey. Transforming a culture of an organization and a team, ready, from mediocrity to high performance.
Okay,
It
no
was
small task.
not at all. And the challenge was getting people from mindset to mind shift, how
Mm,
they were already thinking. And it was a traditional top down leadership, right? So it was the leader, and then it was the employees, and this is what it looks like. And so what I found and what made it a challenge was many people didn't want to do anything outside of their job.
mm,
So and they even tasked it as that's not my job. That's not my responsibility. So there really wasn't any situational leadership. It really wasn't people stepping up. It
mm.
was I come do my job and then I leave. And so there was no succession. It was high turnover. Um, and so my challenge was one, helping people to recognize that they have an investment in that organization, but also in that environment, because they were it was set up through shift work. So there was different
Mhm.
shift leadership. And so you had your morning shift, your evening shift, your night shift, and then you had a weekend shift. And
Got it.
so because it was shift leadership, each leader was different. Each leader ran, so there was no continuity in terms of how things were run. It was like whoever shift you on, that's how it was going to be run. So that was the challenge. One of the things that I'm grateful for even more so now. I didn't understand it as much then as I do now, but I did recognize how do we assess setting people up for success? Like whose gifts, talents, and abilities fit the job they're doing within that shift. So I
Mm.
set my team up so like some people they didn't like certain responsibilities, so I didn't necessarily make them do them. I taught them how to do it because they still need to understand how everything functions. But in that, uh, I empowered them to use their skills, gifts, and talents. And you know what happened, Dave?
What's that?
Interesting thing. They started actually enjoying their work,
Hmm.
became way more of a team, did a lot of cross training, and
Nice.
then we got to the place where our shift ran more smoothly. And then it was a recognition throughout the other shifts, right? And then even with the organization. So then it was like, how do we replicate this shift in other places? And the results and outcomes really couldn't be denied. So
Mm.
that was definitely a challenge, to say the least.
I bet. As the results speak for themselves. But it sounded like between the three shifts in the weekend, I mean, you guys have got four different companies,
Yeah.
four
And
different,
so a term comes up like now, like leadership communications. How do we communicate the message that we have the same mission? We're on the same team,
yeah.
right? Yeah, and everybody not operating in their own silos. Like we actually are here interconnected, interdependent on each other. So
Yeah, and that's a tough one. I mean, it really is difficult sometimes to get people out of their own way, and like I said, and try to break down some of those barriers between departments and shifts and the silos that are just naturally occur. I mean, it's human nature, but it's like that type of organizational culture. I found out a long time ago. It took me a while, but that doesn't happen by accident. You mentioned in the first segment that leadership is intentional, and you can't build a strong organizational culture by accident. It has
you
to be
can't.
intentional. Yeah.
It
I don't see.
definitely has to be intentional. Definitely has to be strategic, right? Um, and a lot of times people talk about the buy-in, but what I found is not necessarily talking about buy-in, but more about investment, right? When we can start helping people to see the investment, it's easier for people to see that they're not necessarily buying into something outside of themselves. They're investing in something that they're a part of. And that changes how they show up. It changes their presence, and it changes their participation level.
I like that a lot because you do hear well, we're going to get them to buy into this, whatever new thing that we're doing. It's like, well, no, buy in, it sounds great, and that's the term everybody uses, kind of colloquial. But I mean, you're right. Well, if I'm investing in the organization, I'm investing in myself, I'm investing in the success of my career. I mean, and that is a whole different ball game than, yeah, I bought into whatever BS that you're brought around, whatever flavor of the month or whatever initiative that the whole corporate speak. Okay, yeah. 3 months from now, they'll forget all about it. And
Right.
unfortunately, that's what a lot of programs, training, leadership is. It sounds good. Oh, I read the Disney book. We're going to do a training on it. We're going to have some one-time training and like a 1 hour or 1 hour keynote or a 1 day workshop is going to radically transform your organization going forward. Like it's a one and done magic pill. Yeah, that doesn't exist. It's that ongoing, intentional, and I'll even almost one up the buy-in. Okay, well, you're not trying to get buy-in; you're trying to get them to invest in the results and the outcome. But you got to be selling it, man. If you're trying to create a different type of culture, you're trying to make a culture shift, you're trying to make things more positive and more engaging. You got to be constantly banging that drum and selling it all
Right.
the time to the
Yeah.
point. There's
With
so
that being
many.
said, one of the things I recognize when I do work with organizations and they have high turnover and people are feeling undervalued or devalued and underpaid, One of the things I talk to leadership in middle management and even the first people in the first line or the front lines is how do we add and extract value, right? How do we
Mhm.
add value to people, but also extract value that's already in people? Because some people may not be aware of it. So these are things that we talk about in terms of like leadership development, organizational development, how to intentionally uh, really develop, right? Develop our staff, develop our leaders. And when you start helping people to realize that they are seen, that they are heard, right, that they're acknowledged, it's a game changer in what people are willing to do, right? What they're willing to do for you as a leader, just because you ask, or just because it becomes something where they have an opportunity. I think a lot of times, especially in because I've seen those workplaces where there's no opportunity for advancement, there's no opportunity for expansion or increase, right? And that's why they come in, they do their job, and when they find a better opportunity, they're gone. But what happens when you start showing people not only that they matter, but that the value of the organization really depends on them as well? You start building a camaraderie. You start building a sense of belonging, and people want to invest in that, and people want to be a part of that. And it's you start really developing what we a lot of times what we call now a community, if you will.
Oh, 100%. And that's the thing when they, what was it? Gallup came out a few years back saying that one of the big drivers of employee engagement, there was a couple of them, but one of the big ones was like the question that they have on their Q12 engagement survey, like, do I have a friend at work? Or something like that was a big one, right? But like you go into the community, right? It's like, okay, I walk in the door, like I don't want to be around these fools. Like I hate this, whatever, that bunch of idiots. Yeah, you're not going to be happy. But if you've got folks that you get along with, and you, let's say, you kind of structure and build that community, for lack of a better term, you're going to want to be invested in the company and do more because, like I said, it's not just I'm looking out for me. I'm doing this for I got my buddies back, right? We're doing this for the team, for the organization, for the people that are there. And I think one of the other things too I remember from some of the Gallup research was um, they mentioned about 70% of the variance in employee engagement came from the person's direct supervisor. So you got a bad boss, you got the best job in the world, best company in the world. You got a crappy supervisor that's just riding you like a nickel pony in front of Kmart. Man, they can make for a miserable, miserable existence. Versus you could have a crap job that pays nothing, and you got a great supervisor and a bunch of people that you get along with really well at work. And no matter how bad the job is or how little it pays, you enjoy being there and going to work.
Yeah, that's why I like to add in social intelligence, social wellness when we talk about organizational and leadership development, intentionally building community and intentionally being intelligent about how we see those social norms within the workplace, and also that organizational culture, and how we intentionally create a culture conducive for people to be successful, happy, and want to be there. Right.
Yeah. Oh, exactly, 100%. You really want to try to build that up, and like I said, you constantly got to sell it to the point where it's part of the culture because it's just people resign themselves that that's how we do it here. Because they've heard it so much, you've sold it so much, you've reinforced it so much. They've built in on it. They like I said, they are invested in it, right? They've got a stake in the game now. They have been heard, and that's a huge thing. And now they're like, wow, when a new person comes in, they're just like, no, man, this is a great place. That's just how we do things here, right? And that's when you kind of won the culture war when all the good things you're trying to put into place has now become baseline of that's just how we roll.
That's how we roll.
You
That's the
you got to
fabric
be
of the company. That's how we roll. Right.
That's how we roll, man. It's just that's yeah. This is how it is here, right? We're that high performing organization. We have this type of culture. That's just how it is. And so that's when you can you have to constantly keep fostering it, but that's where you can chalk one up in the win category. You're like, okay, yeah, that's It bleeds, it just oozes out of people's pores. That's just how things are done here, man. I love it. Absolutely love it. So let me ask you this. What do you see as one of the biggest mistakes leaders make today?
Thinking that leadership is dimensional and not holistic.
Explain.
So a lot of times when we talk about leadership, people look at certain aspects of leadership, like even to the point of what type of leader are you? Are you a servant leader? Are you transformative leader? And it's like people get stuck on being one type of leader instead of recognizing that different leadership is required at different times for different folks. So really, as a leader, we have to be more versatile. So when I say it being more holistic, recognizing how we develop leaders. So one of the reasons I got into the leadership and organizational education development and training was because when I would do training for a lot of organizations, it would be the education was based on a skill set. So this is going to speak to something you said before.
Hmm.
You could be really skilled, but if you don't know how to deal with people, right, then it's not going to be effective leadership because you're not going to have that positive influence and positive impact or inspiration. So part of, I think, that gap is one, how do we develop leaders and how do we train leaders? And I've seen that in a lot of organizations where they'll promote somebody to a leadership role, but they never trained them. And they don't set them up for success. And it's like sink or swim. And so then you come in to do a training, and some of the challenges in terms of the high turnover or the problems with communication or conflict resolution issues is what is that gap was educating them, developing them, and training them. So Robert, what's the difference? Why are you breaking those 3 points down? I think our education includes a development and training. The
Mm.
education is the process of what we're doing for our leaders. The development is the person, the character, who they are authentically. The training is in the skills and the abilities, right? Being able to navigate the actual job responsibilities, doing their due diligence to know how to do their job and do it on a high level. And then it goes back to what you just said, that fostering a culture conducive where we have a lot of leaders within the organization, whether they have a title or not. And so
Mm.
I think that to me, that gap is how leaders are trained. And then also what I've seen in some organizations that I've worked with is they're not building up a leadership funnel within the organization. And a lot of times what they'll do is they'll hire leaders from outside the organization, but the people within the organization are the ones that have to teach them. And that builds a resentment, right? It's like, I'm good enough to teach you the job, but I'm not good enough to be promoted to the leadership role. Or if I'm in a leadership role, I don't have the um, support.
Mm.
And that's where I think, not to go off on too much on a tangent, but that's where things like mentorship and leadership coaching and those type of elements become really valuable tools and resources to prepare and position people for success in that leadership role. I
No,
hope that answers
I would
the
agree with
question.
that 100% because you're right. I mean, the whole adage of, hey, I take my best salesperson and make him the sales manager, and all of a sudden he's like, I don't want this, right? Or your best technical engineer and make them the engineering manager. It's like, you're right. It's a whole different skill set dealing with people than just doing what you do technically, right? And now all of a sudden it's like, well, I can do that really well. That doesn't necessarily mean I am equipped with the skill set to do this. And you're right. You hit the nail on the head when you talk about they don't set them up for success. They set them up to fail, and not necessarily intentionally, but they do. Unfortunately, it ends up happening that way. And sometimes, if they're really not successful, all right, well, best case, maybe they'll take a step back. I just want to go back to selling, or I just want to go back to doing the technical work. But a lot of times, the company doesn't get the setback. The company ends up, well, I'm not successful in this role, so I'm just going to leave and go somewhere else. You end up with that turnover. So you mentioned about how costly turnover is anyway. So yeah, that's a huge one. So one of the things too I want to do, maybe you could touch on just a bit, is the just we talk about turnover a lot, and this particular environment, it's not like it was 30 years ago when you could be a boss and say, fine, you don't want to do it, I'll get rid of you. There's 50 people waiting in line to take your job. That doesn't exist anymore. But talk about just the struggles people have in hiring, but just how expensive turnover is.
Yeah, so turnover hits the bottom line because what happens is you get people and you start investing in them and getting them trained, and then they don't stay. And so now you got to hire for that position again, and the outcome and the results that position is responsible for is not happening. So the so on the financial end, it's a lot of money lost. On the
Mm-hmm.
bottom line, depending on what industry you're in, the productivity is lost. And then I'm gonna add a caveat that people don't talk about is morale. So now, and that's why it continues to fester, not foster, right? It continues to fester
I like that.
in terms of play on words there, but it begins to fester, and it really creates really a soreness within the organization, and in the terms of the miscommunication or just people walking on eggshells within the organization. I've done a lot of work around conflict resolution, and that would be when I would come into organizations, and there are times I would do training and people get quiet, and I'm like, why are you quiet? They said, well, Robert, you're talking about unhealthy organization or unhealthy culture. I said, yeah, that's what we're talking about. They were like, you just talked about our organization, whether you know it or not. And I'm like, I didn't mean to step on toes, but now we have to have a different conversation because I got their attention and they're like, thank you for helping us to recognize that, but what's going on? And I think that's where it becomes more than just training. I think that's where you start having conversations with the leadership team and how things are communicated throughout the organization, the leadership message, the mission, because a lot of times people will have a mission within an organization, but the people within an organization, if you ask them, what's the mission? They look at you and go, there's a mission, right? And then I'm
Yes.
like, yeah, it's on the front of your building. You didn't, it's like our
Oh,
mission is to, and they're like, okay.
oh, I laugh. That's one of my biggest pet peeves, man. I'm saying it's so funny because you end up with this vision, mission, values, blah blah blah, right? And the only two times you ever see it are one during new hire orientation because it happens to be in the book, and you got to sign off that you got the employee manual, and then for worst case, you ever get called before the man, you got to go up to the C suite where the air's a little thin, and then all of a sudden you see vision, mission, values like they're on the wall, but no one's looked at them since they installed them, right? It's like
Nothing
what you're
tangible at all.
no, what you're saying and what you're doing and what that says on the wall don't match, right? Because people, well, they don't know. No, everybody knows. Everybody's looking. Everybody's looking, right? You're not going to get away with anything nowadays. If you're in a leadership position, they're always watching. And what you're saying and doing don't match, if they do remember what it is, the vision, mission, and values, right? You're like, you just blew a hole in your organizational trust. And they're like, okay, I'm going to back off. I'm going to disengage. And hey, I'm just going to keep my head below the radar screen. Haven't seen a whole lot of engaged folks that are keeping their head below the radar screen, right? Just saying, I come in, I do what I got to do, I keep quiet, I get out, paycheck clears, God bless America, right? That's not building a healthy organization. That's, like you said, cultural fear. That's the festering. It's kind of like, okay, this is you learn, like, don't stick your head up, right? Because you're gonna get whacked.
Yeah. It's like organizational whack-a-mole,
That's
right?
exactly what it is. And everyone's like, why aren't the little the moles splitting up? Because you whacked them enough times that even a dog realized if you put his nose into poop enough and you smack him with the newspaper enough, maybe I won't poop in the house, right? When you're talking about a little puppy, right? So at some point, like you do the same thing. It's conditional training. So basically, it's conditional behavioral training. Wow, Joe spoke up. Joe took a beat down, or Joe's not working here anymore. Like, I don't want to do the same thing. I don't want to end up with the same results Joe had. Maybe I ought to keep my mouth shut. But where your good idea is going to come from?
Right. There's no mastermind in that.
No. Then you got to be the sage on the stage, so to speak, as the leader. Like it's all on you, and we are always better than me, right? When it comes to let's put our heads together and figure this out. I'm a big proponent, big fan of like lean process improvement, and I really like one of the tenets of it that the person closest to the problem doing the work probably has the best idea of how to fix the problem in the work. So instead of coming up with the solution from on high, sometimes it's okay, what do you guys think? Let them make the fix and make the improvement and and eliminate the roadblock, and you can be there to assist and support and help. But yeah, I think that when you shut down that kind of dialogue and those ideas, man, I think you shut down your growth as an organization too.
Yeah, growth is stymied. It becomes still and stagnant.
100%, 100%. Well, that sounds like a great place to end this segment. As number 2 of Conversations on Leadership with Dr. Dave, and we'll be back in just a minute for our final question and our wrap up. See you in a bit. Welcome back to our final segment of Conversations on Leadership with Dr. Dave, and we're here with Dr. Robert Wilson, our special guest today, and we're going to jump into our very last question that I have no doubt he has a great way to answer this. What do you think is the best way for leaders to improve their leadership skills?
Sounds like a setup question.
Sounds like a setup. Almost like you do that. Oh my God.
That's right. Like, how do you go about that, right? It actually is when my heartbeat comes in, it is education, development, and training that focuses specifically on self-awareness, self-education, and self-mastery.
Nice.
In terms of leaders. You said, well, Robert, how does that translate into leadership? It translates into how our perspective as leaders, our process that we use in developing leaders, but also our practices in a way that's really practical and pragmatic. What does that even mean? Well, I'm glad you asked. So it improves leadership skills by helping people to change their confidence and competence. A lot of times when we talk about leadership, and this was a conversation that I would hear often, and it was one of those things that I felt like I understood why people shared it, but it seemed like it was incomplete. They would say, well, to be a good leader, you need to have these qualities. Or to be a good leader, you have to have these characteristics. But one of the things that it left out was building confidence and competence. When you have a competence, you have more confidence as a leader. When you are a skilled leader, you can shift and navigate more holistically versus dimensionally. I don't negate the dimensions of leadership, but what I realize is they are not a standalone. So they are interconnected, interrelated, and they make a more holistic approach. That's why when folks talk about what type of leader they are, and I say this respectfully, not knocking anybody and what their leadership style is, because sometimes we do gravitate more to a style.
Of course.
But what I ask everybody to consider as they watch this podcast is to consider this: not limiting leadership to where you at the time, because as you allow yourself to grow and expand, so does your leadership. As you experience different folks that you're leading, you change your leadership. Some leadership might be situational depending on your role and responsibility. So I think one of the best ways to improve leadership is to focus on self-awareness as leaders, self-education, when you start learning things and things about yourself, but then also self-mastery. Like, for instance, and I'll give you a good example of that. So with the work that I do, a lot of my development, whether it's personal, professional, leadership, organizational, focuses on the inside out. Like, and a lot of that comes from my background training in mental health and neurolinguistic programming and hypnotherapy. One of the things that I have found is that you don't lead how your leadership is, you lead how you are.
Mm.
And so you lead also who you lead from who you are, where you are, and how you are. And as you learn to shift that, your leadership changes. But a lot of times we are trying to lead other people when we haven't started to lead ourselves.
Interesting. There's a lot of nuggets in that one. One, kind of refer back to some of the like we mentioned in the first segment, some of the Maxwell's work. Like I said, you talk about from the situational leadership end of it, and then I said going back to kind of that 5 levels of leadership. You're absolutely right, because one of the things, like the very end cap in the book, is kind of like we are at different levels with different people in different situations all the time. I got a brand new guy that's working for me. I'm going to be a level 1 positional leader, right? All I know is I'm the boss, right? I hired him and I can come in between him and his paycheck because I've known you for like 3 days, right? That's it. Versus I got a guy that's been here 20 years and, he would walk through fire to do anything you ask him to do, right? Because you built that, reputational trust, or anywhere in between. They're following you because they know you're the most competent at what you do or skilled at what you do, right? So they're gravitating towards that. But right, every single person that we run into, we're in a different situation. Even if it's at work, like I said, all your employees are not all going to be at the same level at the same time. So you do have to pivot and change and flex and come across to people in different ways based on where they're at, not, like you said, not necessarily where you're at. So I love that part of what you said, because that's absolutely right. I mean, you're not going to come across as a great leader if you don't have, if you're not eating your own dog food, basically. Okay, if you're not if you're not practicing what you're preaching, like I said, people see it and they see the hypocrisy and they're like, yeah, you don't do that. Yeah, don't tell me about that, because I watch you. You don't do that. That's blows a hole in the organizational trust. You kind of overdraw that account. But I think the other thing that I liked about what you were saying was that people have to be self-aware. And I think sometimes we're not as self-aware as we should be. That's why I'm such a fan of assessment tools and things like that. So you learn about things that are there, but you don't, it's not blatant. It's not right in your face. Okay. You really get to learn a lot more about yourself, whether it's a self-rated tool, a 360 or whatever. When you get those kind of pieces of data and all these little data points on how I'm wired, how I communicate, what really motivates and drives me, what are my skills, how do I view the world, what's my leadership style. Those, the more I learn about that type of stuff, the better I can come across to you as a leader, because I understand where my weaknesses are, where my strengths are, and where I need to shore up, and where I can bring you in to help fill the gaps of what I can't do. So I think you're right. Self-awareness is probably one of the key starting points to really become an effective leader.
That's what I call mindfulness leadership. Where you are becoming aware, you're learning to do it without judgment, because sometimes as leaders we judge ourselves. We're hypercritical.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that we shouldn't assess ourselves. I'm not saying we shouldn't evaluate ourselves, but not always judging ourselves. And then the other part is being able to do it with curiosity. Remember, one of the things I shared was when the first question you asked me, I said, let me tell you what I used to think leadership was.
Yes.
And the reason I prefaced that was because it's changed. The reason I shared that, because it evolved, just like I've changed, like I've evolved. That's why I start off by saying, I didn't think of leadership nearly like I think about it now, multi-layered, multi-dimensional, more holistic. But now I think that becomes really important. But a lot of of times I think we shift, especially in this day and age, we shift on what a leader is, right? I think sometimes, it's also what a leader is not.
Mm.
And maybe what that leader is not within your own scope. Like there are certain things that like you just mentioned about yourself, like you may not be necessarily a empathetic leader. You might be old school and like, hey, just get it done. And I'm not saying that there might not be a space for that, but you can't deal with every employee that same way.
No.
That's why you have such emphasis on emotional intelligence, right? And being able to implement that in your leadership style and skill set, and recognizing, but not only the emotions of the people you serve, but also your own emotion. Like, what's your buttons, right? As a leader, and so being able to check yourself in a way that is about your growth and development, not necessarily as a strike against you or something was really about you missing the mark, but how can I shift? And I think that's where that improvement comes in, because one of the things I think in the question you said improve,
Yeah.
right? Part of that improvement is being aware that first of all you can improve, and recognizing where you are, but also where do you want to go as a leader.
I like it. And one of the things I like the fact you brought in, talk about improvement, you brought in emotional intelligence, and a lot of things that we look at with assessment tools. Okay. Say your communication style, right? And how how you're wired, how you process information, how you deliver information, relatively fairly well set, right? It doesn't change on a dime, right? It's, are you analytical? Are you a spreadsheet analytical guy? Are you a outgoing people person, right? Or are you the 3 bullet point kind of, hey, just give me the facts and get out? Or are you the hey, let's tell me a story, right? And so I mean, a lot of us just wired a certain way. But what drives us? What are our motivators? But emotional intelligence is one of the few things that you can really get better at and move the needle over time. So I like the fact that, like I said, when you talk about improving leadership skills, that's one of the things that you really, you can, once you learn about it, you're like, oh, wow, emotional intelligence scores are kind of in the toilet. Apparently I can't, self-awareness and self-regulation are not that great, and I can't read a room to save my life. And I pretty much blurt out whatever I think. I have a definitive lack of filters, right? So maybe I need to think about things and start improving things. So, that's just one of those deals where you like I said, you can move the needle. And that's what I like about the study of emotional intelligence, is that something that you can do tangibly to improve on as you go through your leadership career, right?
Yeah.
So, but unfortunately, a lot of people don't. A lot of people don't know. They've never been assessed. They don't have that data. They don't have that information. And then when it boils down to it, how are you going to fix something that you don't know is broke, or you don't know that you can improve, or you don't know how to improve? You
Well,
just don't.
you don't even know what it is, because a lot of times we hear a lot of phrases now that people coin, and they're buzzwords, right? And it's like, why would I need emotional intelligence? So part of it is the dialogue and discussion that we have around leadership and different. That's why I was saying different competencies, not just the characteristics, not just the qualities, but what are some of the competencies for me as a leader to improve my leadership skills, to help me to develop as a person, right? Because I think one of that I think that's a gap with a lot of leadership, is we will give people skills and competencies, but not check them in terms of character and content.
Mm, yes, yes,
That's
yes.
a whole nother
A whole different
conversation.
podcast, right? We could
It
spend a whole
totally is.
hour or two talking about character.
But
Oh my,
I just wanted to throw that in terms of character, integrity, and ethics, right?
well, it's funny you
Morals,
mentioned that, and I'm glad you
values.
did, because you could have all the competence in the world. Like, I've got the skills. If you're a dirtbag, man, you're a dirtbag, right? I mean, I'm just being honest. I mean, if you don't have the integrity, you don't have the trust. I mean, people know you're talking out of the side of your mouth. You say one thing, you do another. I mean, you could have the skills. Matter of fact, I drop a couple names right now. I'm not, but I mean, I
Don't do
understand.
it. Don't
No,
do
no
it.
names, no judgment. But I've observed over the years, right, where they got the competencies, they've got the skills, but they don't have that. And I think you could get if you had that, the character, the integrity, the trust. They know you're good to your word. You can have somebody like that that's a much better leader, even though they don't have the skills that this other guy does, so this other lady does. But people will follow them more readily because they know that they got my back. They're truthful, they're integrity, they got integrity, they're honest, they're they've got the character, and I'll follow the character even though they're not as competent, but they're working on it and they're learning versus the person that's got all the skills and like I said, is not the most trustworthy in the world. Let's just put it this way.
Yeah.
It's just a way of looking at it. So with that, we'll wrap up. Tell our listeners how they can connect with you, your company, with the book, a website, connect on LinkedIn. If they just want to like soak in all the goodness of Robert Wilson, man, how would they make that happen?
All right. Well, first of all, thank you for the platform to share that. If you want information on Robert Wilson Consulting or Wilson Global Outreach Solutions, they can find me at wilsongos.com. Again, wilsongos.com. If they want to find out information on my online academy, Global Solutions Education and Training Academy.learnworlds.com, or you can go on the LearnWorld platform and put in Global Solutions Education and Training Academy. My books are on Amazon, Archway Publishing, but you can also go to my website, drrobertlwilsonjr.com. The books are Self-Image, Your Vision, Your Wellness, Words That Create Wellness Using Affirmations and Afformations, and then also Wellness Creation, a workbook and journal to guide your wellness journey.
Nice.
So, where all books are sold, and I'm on all social media, or most social media, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Alignable. You can go on Dr. Robert L. Wilson Jr. Again, Dr. Robert L. Wilson Jr. Also, if you're like, where are all those platforms? If you go on Linktree and access Dr. Robert L. Wilson Jr., you will see all those platforms on Linktree.
Gotcha. Well, what we'll do is we'll make sure and we'll put your Linktree link into the description so people can get it. We'll also put the website and all that kind of stuff there so they can just click in the description and get to where they need to be, and they can reach out at any time. And like I said, I would highly recommend to reach out, connect with Dr. Wilson on LinkedIn. It's definitely well worth your time. Check out some of his stuff. And thank you for your time. Thank you for your expertise. Cannot wait to talk again soon. So that is this segment. This is wrap up Conversations on Leadership with Dr. Dave for this particular episode. And we will be back next time. So take care, and we will see you then.